would be uh, what would be you as a hydrologist in your profession, what you study and what you're an expert in, what would be your three main takeaways or a few of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one takeaway is I've already mentioned that it's a different year, different scenario because we start already with the ground saturated, with the reservoirs largely full. And so it's kind of a different kind of flood scenario than it was in the past years. Another takeaway I have is last year, I think, it was while we had really favorable meteorology that melted it slow, we also learned that after the floods of the 80s, we did some really smart things and designed some debris basins and other kinds of things that really ended up working overall very well. And so this year, now I'm looking at like all the design we did around the reservoirs and in the homes where we've developed. We should have been anticipating for these kinds of things. We're going to find out where those good decisions were made and maybe where some weren't and more risk was taken, if you will. I think that we also have to remember that, we're always living in a world where we take risk. And when we could have designed that home that you spoke of, it could have had this huge pump there, a pump like in the West Deserts that we did way back in the 80s, right? And it would have solved the problem, but nobody's going to pay for that. So they pay for a system that's adequate for most scenarios, but you can never prepare for like the largest events anyway.
Like, for instance, the Jordan River overflowing into your entire basement.
That's right. Like nobody's going to pay for a pump that will pump all the water in the Jordan River, right? It's like that would be ridiculous. But if you get a serious event really high, it could be that much water. But we take risk in like what we're willing to pay, right, in order to protect ourselves. And we'll find some of those stresses this year. That's kind of one of the takeaways is I think we'll see some really great designs. I mean, I was intrigued and happy to see it working the way it was, right? And I hope it holds. But there's a risk that the design, that they deemed adequate for the risk will be sufficient or not. And that's what will happen. And of course, yeah, we want the water managers, but they're looking at kind of the bigger picture, right? And trying to protect the overall system. And they can't always, like individual subdivisions or areas, be able to control it so that it doesn't have adverse effects there.
What's your understanding quickly of the safeguards that are already in place, like the systems that are in place to prevent floods?
Well, I don't know if I can speak specifically, but yeah, this is why we're seeing problems now is we're seeing water managers make decisions based on the infrastructure that's available to anticipate like worse scenarios, right? So that we don't have even more catastrophic problems. And so it could cause some local flooding and some local problems. And if you're that person, that's the worst case scenario, right? But at the same time, they're trying to prevent, the case where the dam overflows. And now you've got, major problems like for the whole area. And so they have to manage that whole picture. And not that I believe that's in play, but those are the things that they're looking at to distinguish the different infrastructure and manage it.
Right. How concerned do you think residents along that stretch of river should be?
Um, I mean, it's nerve-wracking, right? Because one of the problems is you don't really know where the groundwater is going. This is high water table that's causing a lot of the problems, and you can have little, almost like channels of high porosity, high movement of water, and you don't know if you're sitting on top of that or if it's over that kind of is over next, somewhere else. And not all of those things are really known or understood, especially when you're probing in drier times. And so it's like I think there'll be a lot of people that'll things will work out just fine, but there will definitely be it will find the weak spots. It will stress some of these systems. And if you're living in those areas, it's concerning.